sure that you all have 1 minute or two to grab a cup of coffee. So just prior this, Melissa is all set up. We start with Melissa. A really short intro. I'm Dummy for the ones who just joined us. I'm VP Marketing at PlayPlay. PlayPlay is a video creation platform for marketing and communication teams. And we are thrilled to launch this second edition of the Content Summit in Europe, first one in the US. Super excited to have Melissa for this US edition. So, Melissa, maybe let's do a short introduction of yourself. Please let me know if I forget anything important. You are Chief Creative Officer at ClickUp, the all-in-one productivity platform. Prior to this, you actually had similar exec roles in marketing and creative at BuzzFeed and Cheddar. You have actually quite a lot of remarkable awards, naming a few: Forbes 30 under 30, Business Insider's 30 most creative people under 30. You actually have more than 21K followers on LinkedIn, including myself. You actually post a lot on LinkedIn. So for the people in the audience that don't follow Melissa on LinkedIn, please do, because she posts a lot of insightful content there. And yeah, that's it. You also have 3 cats. I just learned that a few minutes ago. So if you hear like some cats roar, that's that's normal. That's Melissa's. Oh, Danny has cats too, I guess. That's the new normal now. We all work with our cats.
Exactly.
So, Melissa, we are here today to talk about how we can build a strong brand identity thanks to creative content, and maybe without spending millions. So, we have almost 40 minutes together. Then we'll jump in another conference with Anthony Canada. So, please, in the audience, make sure that you post your questions in the Q&A session. So, we can see them along the session, and let's start.
Let's go.
Let's go. So maybe before we start, as an introduction, Melissa, you're Chief Creative Officer, so you're not exactly a typical CMO. What does it mean to be Chief Creative Officer? What is your scope? How do you embody it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So traditionally, companies have had one CMO that oversees brand and oversees performance marketing and analytics and all of the things that go into marketing. But the reality of that is, to have someone that's equally right and left brained, that can really both build brand, but also build like a performance machine, doesn't really usually work out. I hate to say this, but the average tenure of a CMO is 18 months. And the reason is because they're looking for this like golden unicorn to do it all. And the reality is that person can't typically do both things that well. So my role here is really to oversee everything as it pertains to our brand. So design, our social, our voice, everything that you touch and interact with, that a future customer will interact with, a current customer will interact with, that ties back to our brand is sort of what I oversee. And that really like complements what our growth strategy is. So we have a chief growth officer who I partner with on pretty much everything, so that we're in lockstep across the way, but we're building brand alongside also running a machine, because brand is, such a big differentiator. It's incredibly important, especially in a very saturated and crowded space where, next to CRM, we are in the most competitive space there is. So it's very important for us. And we realized that very early on to build a strong, 10, 20, 30-year brand that will differentiate us.
Okay, super clear. And so, question, how do you actually measure the impact of your team's work? How do you measure brand awareness, brand perception?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix of qualitative and quantitative data, right? So, we're doing a lot of the creative that also supports a lot of the performance marketing. But we can kind of look at, there's a duality of everything that you do, right? There's like, does it make people talk about the product? Is it share worthy? Is it discussion worthy, right? And those are all like sort of more qualitative metrics that you can measure by share of voice. You can measure by, does your brand awareness lift in certain markets when you do certain campaigns? And then there's obviously also the quantitative data of like, is this ad converting? Are we
Yeah,
actually
sure.
able to convert people to the product? Are we able to create a video that informs them, has some element of our brand to it, but it's doing its job? So we're constantly looking at those metrics across like both the qualitative and quantitative. It really just depends on what we're doing, right? Is what is the goal and the KPI for that specific campaign, and are we able to hit that? But I think it's sometimes you look at something from just like a quantitative perspective when there's a whole lot of other kind of qualitative data that's really important. I'll give one quick example. We ran a performance ad campaign, and you'll see one of the videos from it later, that we saw converting. But what we really saw that was interesting is that it was getting shared and talked about all over. And people were ripping the video from our YouTube when they would see it and then reposting it across other YouTube accounts. And it racked up millions of views that way. Now, we're never going to be able to attribute any of conversions to that,
Yeah.
but we know it made an impact. So all of that sort of like dark conversion is really that qualitative data that you should pay attention to, because it signals that things are working. And then if you're not seeing that on the quantitative side, you might want to ask yourself, are you actually measuring the funnel correctly? Because you know that it's actually making an impact, and the data is not going to tell the whole story. So I think it's that marriage.
Yeah, I guess you also need to have the support of your management, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, if you are if you're working for a team that doesn't believe in brand, it's much harder. And I think there are companies. I truly believe that like building brand is essential in any company these days. Like the moat is really thin outside of community and brand, because product parity and feature parity is pretty table stakes at this point. Like people are building equally as fast. Tech is completely democratized. Something that you could build would have taken 5 years to build, it takes 6 months to build. So when you think about the fact that like tech no longer fully sets you apart for a long enough period of time, what are those things that will forever, right? And brand is one of those.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk now about your experience at ClickUp. When you joined, the brand was definitely not the one it is today. I heard you say at a conference that your North Star at ClickUp was to make your brand feel human, I think. So
Yes.
what was your strategy to reach this North Star? What was your roadmap to make the ClickUp's brand feel human?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So a lot of that kind of came from my experience at BuzzFeed and Cheddar, where we did very, very specific things to connect with people and to humanize content so that it was relatable for them. And my thought process there was, well, if that worked on the media side, the application to SaaS must not be that far of a jump. And although it's not, you can't copy and paste, there's certainly like things that will be applicable that are important to take over. So the North Star when I joined ClickUp was really, hey, look, like, I joined for a reason. Our CEO is bold and bright and colorful, and that comes out in his personality, the way he dresses. The site itself had a lot of personality. They did very specific things that alluded to the fact that they cared about those really small, nuanced pieces that people notice and take notice of. And that was really what attracted me to that opportunity, because I knew that I could apply what I wanted to apply to this company, and they would appreciate it and likely really embrace it. So the North Star was really to build this humanize our product, because no longer can products really just be sold on features, as I mentioned. And what we really wanted to do was capitalize on what had been built and continue to really scale up and build an innovative, bold, colorful, engaging brand that empowered our users in the world to be better and faster and more productive, but still being humorous and approachable. And I think that's the key. It's like not just pushing out their content and being like, this is going to make you more productive, this, but like capturing their heart and their mind through that humorous, approachable like take on it. And we try to invite them into our narrative a bit, using that humor and really like trying to cut through that corporate seriousness. You can still get your message across and you can still be really poignant without being stiff. And I think that was something that we really wanted to focus on. And that was all kind of tied up into how do we humanize. So a lot of that was, really small decisions. It's, making people laugh when they import from another product to switch over, right? That little small little like kind of like a serotonin boost when they do something, right? Everything that kind of plays into that, the connection that they would have to us across social, making that feel human and great and engaging, and like there's actually people there that care and support you. And then at the same time also creating our advertising so that it was really narrative driven and told a story, and not only just kind of spoke about features, but drew them into this world of productivity and of ClickUp through that approach and that style.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of questions on how to convince the rest of your team to believe and invest in brand, especially if you're early, medium stage startup.
Yeah.
How do you prove or demonstrate the value to higher management? So that's kind of close everything we've been saying, but that would be super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think like first of all, having a conversation around the fact that, and it depends, but if you're looking to build, a large legendary company, only large legendary companies are built like they're built on brand, right? They're built on brand quality, brand trust, brand affinity, and also being noticeable and standing out. So I think that there's like an argument to be made that regardless of what you're doing, it's really important that you do that early on. And I think the conversation and convincing is, hey, let's try a couple of things that show that this is actually working. And like when I first started out, we didn't have a Super Bowl budget. We were doing really small things to try to build the brand, right? Telling our story, adding creativity into the way that we would release products. So on our weekly feature releases, we would create a song with our internal team and a little bit of a motion graphic, just anything to bring personality to the brand. And these things are not like things that really should need convincing. There's something that's new, that's different, that will garner attention. And I think like, in an attention economy, like you really have to think that way no matter what. So even if the conversation isn't brand, it could be more like, let's infuse some creativity into what we do so that we can stand out. And what that will ladder up to over time is the fact that you're actually building brand. You internally want to have that North Star of what the brand becomes. And that's what the decisions you make. You'll fail. You'll do things that you won't want to repeat in the future. But I think having that North Star and then making really small bets or big bets, but small bets to ladder up to big bets, is an efficient way to do it without convincing, trying to convince a team that they need to readjust their strategy completely, because that isn't the case. But building it in as a part of a holistic strategy makes a lot of sense. But it's not like trading one for the other. It's not like, should we be super efficient with paybacks and CAC, or should we build brand? You should do both.
And what about maybe showing examples to the top management of brands that had an amazing journey and actually succeeded in building this and are now getting rewarded? Do you have like examples? Like, of course, obviously, ClickUp is a great example, but do you have like other names in mind?
I mean, I think there was a mix for me. Like I always kind of wanted to try to bridge the gap between B2B and B2C, because I think B2C marketing is obviously like much more creative traditionally.
Of course.
So figuring out the way that we can marry like what a B2C brand would do mixed with, obviously the fact that we're still selling to businesses was really key. But at the end of the day, even if you're selling to, specific buyers, like they're still people, right? And they're going to resonate with things for different reasons. Now, that doesn't mean your message is the same message across everything. It means it's highly personalized, but it can be personalized in a way that that person will resonate with it or laugh, right, and share it with their colleagues. So I think that there's kind of this mix of how to approach that B2C mix with B2B marketing approach that I thought we could do really well. I thought the sky was really blue, and I hadn't seen too many other companies in the B2B space do a ton of that. There were a few that I referenced that I liked certain aspects of how they marketed. And I said, hey, why don't we try to infuse kind of our own? But I also believe build your own playbook. You know your customers, try to understand what they want, understand what you want to become and how you want to come up off in market and what your brand needs to stand for, and build for that too.
Another great question from Carmo. When creating your brand strategy, did you work with an outside agency or did you do everything in-house? And I mean, we could extend this question not only to building the brand, but also doing all the amazing content you're doing at ClickUp. Like, is it all done in-house or are you using vendors?
We are not using any vendors. I think, like companies that are in maybe 2 or 3 or 4,000 people typically have both. They bifurcate. They have their internal creative team, and then they have an outside agency. But we've done everything in-house to date. So we scaled up with only a few motion graphic designers and video team and the core of what we needed to get started. But no, we don't use any external agencies at this point. We really built it ourselves. And I think that was the way to go. I think like no one knows your product and your audience and your customers like you do. So to really start that up and you live with it every day, right? You eat, sleep, and breathe everything that has to do with the company. So to build it internally made a lot of sense. And also it becomes very efficient if you have the right people able to work on everything. They're super passionate about it. They're motivated about it. It's different because they're not working across a ton of different companies. They're focused on you and your mission.
Okay, so that's your advice, do it internally.
At first, of course, I think, at different stages, there are different approaches to how you approach things, right? You may need to do it externally at some point or outsource some of it. But I think the scrappy way to do it internally is really a great way to start. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So let's dive into the creative content. We have some really cool examples to show you, guys. So I mean, you seem to believe that strong content can impact your brand recognition, your brand perception, create actually this personality you're speaking about. So maybe let's dive into concrete examples at ClickUp where you took risks and apparently it paid off. So I suggest we have a look at your Super Bowl campaign where your team actually reimagined the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It's super funny. I'm going to play it and then we'll see if the audience has questions. And of course, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Absolutely.
I think we're done writing this declaration. Is that the latest copy? Is that the latest copy?
I swear it was just here.
Oh, John, you had one job!
It seems to have vanished before my very eyes.
Fellas, relax. I created a ClickUp task.
Oh, Tommy, always saving John's derriere.
No. You just click. Oh, ClickUp.
So why this concept, Melissa? How did you come up with this idea in the first place?
So we have an amazing team internally. Just to start out, we did that entire thing internal, which was an amazing bonding experience with management, with the team, with trust across everyone, and it was a lot of work, but it really was, such a wonderful experience overall. But I'll say that, the concept and just first of all, doing a Super Bowl ad was not something that we just did haphazardly.
Yeah.
A lot of what we had done over the past 2 years had really laddered up to the fact that this made a lot of sense for us. We had done a ton of testing with concepts and, performance ads with other historical concepts, where we felt like people resonated enough with it. And, we toyed around with a ton of ideas. And at the end of the day, when you have 30 seconds to capture someone's attention, you really need to make sure that they understand the scene that they're in. So choosing the Declaration and kind of the most historical moment in our country's history kind of set us up for people to actually know what was going on immediately. And then to incorporate the fact that if they had been using ClickUp, the documents wouldn't have gotten lost and it would have made it a hell of a lot easier. Made a lot of sense. It was humorous enough. It was smart humor, which is something that we wanted to go for. Like there's a lot of, just silly humor in the Super Bowl. And I think taking a smart approach to it while using that kind of, shell of a historical scene made a lot of sense for us. And then incorporating our product in a fun and funny way. And, that was the concept we went with. We tested a ton to get there, but that was the one that resonated with people most. And people really liked it for the most part. And I think, we sold a bunch of deals because of it. People reference it all the time, which is great. We took a risk and it paid off.
Yeah, I mean, this creative is super funny. And that's actually a good transition with Danny's question, because you use a lot of humor at ClickUp, but sometimes it's not that natural for some companies. So yeah, Danny is asking you, is there a way to be both creative and have a professional voice? Fun and professional.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's, we also do a mix of content, but I think infusing humor into anything you do, if it's done well, resonates. I think there's definitely like that balance of like, if it's not funny and it's like, like cringeworthy, it ruins like a lot of what you're trying to get across. So you don't want to toe that line too much if you're not confident with it. And finding your voice is also a big part of it. Like you're not going to nail what that creative voice is that marries education and also, creativity immediately. That takes time to get there. And I think that's also the benefit of using an internal team, because you're able to work on that together. If it doesn't land, it doesn't feel good, you evolve, you iterate, right? You're constantly iterating on that. So yeah, I mean, we do a ton of educational content too, and we infuse creativity in different ways, right? It's not the declaration every single time, but we are able to take elements of what we did within the declaration, apply that. And I think it's always like taking small things that worked and just being strategic about the application of how you infuse that into what you're doing. So there is a way to be both creative and professional, and I think we try to strike that balance pretty often.
Mm-hmm. Okay, super interesting. I wanted also to mention something else in our discussion. I mean, creative content doesn't have to be only about video. ClickUp is actually quite known for your billboard campaigns. And I think this is intriguing and super interesting, because billboards, we are talking about offline, physically limited reach.
Yeah.
And somehow at ClickUp, you managed to make it multi-channel and create digital resonance around it. So how did you succeed in creating buzz and awareness with a billboard campaign?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different kind of ways that this came about. First of all, luckily I had a management leadership team that was also on board with testing out of home, which is huge. I mean, coming into that was just a blessing. But out of home had always been a really big, I think, a big inspiration for me. Every campaign I ever remembered when I was living in Manhattan, I had been just staring at on the subways, and they were always the most creative. They told stories. They were great. They captured my attention. I bought a lot of stuff based on these campaigns. I think in an attention economy, when you're thinking about how inundated people are online with messages of things trying to sell them, you want to reach them in a moment of like clarity, right? If they're outside, if they're walking by, if they're driving, they're not attached to their phone. And I think that there's an opportunity there when you're not trying to capture people where everyone else is trying to capture them. So, while people have run billboard campaigns in the past, it's not typically used by SaaS. So, I mean, we were pretty strategic. We chose markets where, it was large tech hubs, knowledge workers, and really tried to make sure that we inundated the cities with all of these ads. A lot of them, they were kind of polarizing. One, we make a promise. I think we definitely hold to that promise, but, making any sort of promise like that is definitely like polarizing. And then saying we're the one app to replace them all is also really polarizing. We don't exactly say what we do. We don't exactly tell you what apps we replace. It's just big, bold, legible, and you can see it everywhere. Now, as a first out-of-home campaign, I think that's exactly the approach that you want to take. Now, it'll make some people mad because you're not telling them what you do, But in that capacity, they're talking about you because they're angry that you're not telling them what you do, and they're taking that next step. It's all about getting someone to take a secondary step after looking at something that you're trying to achieve. So maybe you make some people mad, but I honestly think some of the best creative and some of the best decisions you make are going to be slightly polarizing. The worst thing you can have is apathy. Oh, I saw a billboard. Yeah, I saw that billboard. Oh, I see this message everywhere. I don't know what it means. You're talking about it with others. So I think that there's a way to do that. And that also kind of naturally captures the ability for people to want to talk about it offline too, because it is so jarring. You see it everywhere and no one knows what it is. And all of a sudden it's popping up everywhere. You're going to talk about it.
Yeah, it could be done with billboards. It could be done with other stuff like street marketing or smaller campaigns, right? If you don't have
it doesn't need to be a huge billboard push. There's a ton of other approaches that you can take too that do the same thing and have the same effects.
Time is running super fast. I want to make sure that we have the time to watch the second example that you sent me because it's really cool too. So we will watch it in a few seconds. But at ClickUp, you actually play a lot with your competitors. I mean, even your tagline makes it pretty clear: one app to replace them all. So you're creative, I think, in the way you compare yourself to your competitors. You go beyond dull features comparison, right? So let's see this example and then you tell us about it.
Sounds good.
Are you an engineer suffering from the effects of Jira? Talk to your boss today about a better tool, also known as ClickUp. ClickUp lets you open your workflow and frees you of the rigidity you were forced to work with before. Side effects include shock at tons of included features without necessary add-ons and blissful team communication and support. Try a better tool, also known as ClickUp. Now
so this one is pretty bold.
No. Yeah, it's very bold. Yeah, I'm happy to chat about that one. We don't go that hard against every competitor separately. I don't think that would be a strategic move. But what we noticed was that the mainstream sentiment and culture, they were constantly talking about how frustrated they were with Jira. It had become at that point kind of a meme online where people were saying, if you think Instagram's bad for your health, try Jira. And something like that would get 85,000 likes and retweets. And when something kind of penetrates mainstream like that, it gives you this ability to say, all right, we can play with this a little bit. It's mainstream enough. Of course, it would still be polarizing, but we wanted to take that. And we felt like we really had a competitive edge. And if we could tell the story in a funny way, we could really, make a move there. So we decided to use a common framework that people are used to, which are these ridiculous over the top pharmaceutical ads where people are throwing their hands in their heads and things are terrible. And then they're dancing in meadows. And to use that kind of analogy of frustration versus that other side, we thought was a really great approach. So also, to play with your competitors in a way where something could almost be an SNL skit, felt like it was lighthearted enough where it did exactly what it was meant to do. And it really, people really liked it and it resonated in a great way. So we don't do that across the board. It's always very nuanced. It's let's make a strategic decision based on the things that we're seeing in culture and the things we're hearing from our customers. And let's create an approach where we think we can come off with smart humor that people will think is smart and creative at the same time and also get the message across.
Yeah, and somehow you create sympathy with your audience because, it shows that you understand what they go through every day. So that's probably a smart way of doing it without being too harsh with your competitors. We have a question from Mark that has been voted quite a lot. So that's more on the strategic side of things again, but how do you attach brand identity to UVP? So mission, vision, values discussion. Because some execs wouldn't see the interest in doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it all connects. It kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like, brand is everything, and it should echo through everything. So the experience you have in your product, and the experience you have on the landing page and on the site, through your social, through everything, should feel like it's cohesive to that brand identity. And I think if you're trying to frame it with executives, to have a kind of a disparate, identities across different pieces of content and things that you're doing, it doesn't really create a coherent story. So I think it's making sure that, like, you create that North Star, and then you can ladder down all of the different things that you're doing, and how you want to infuse that. But yeah, I mean, I think it is like a sum of its parts. Every small little decision that you make, a tweet you make, all should ladder up to that. And when you have that in the back of your mind, that North Star, then it becomes a little bit easier. It's not this giant decision. It's hey, are we all aligned on this is what we want our brand to feel, look, come across as, aesthetically, from a personality perspective. And then everything ladders up to that more naturally. So I would just say it's if you can align people on that North Star, a lot of the other pieces become way easier, because they're not just like making these separate decisions over time.
And so do you keep communicating about those and your company to make sure that every employee knows the mission, the vision, and embody it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like it's a cross company like thing. It's across our people team, our people org. It's everything. A lot of I would say, our brand identity and our personality very much aligns with our core values of the people that, the values that we have for the people that are working at the company.
Yeah, the culture.
Yeah, I mean, everything should really tie back to that. If our culture was really stiff, our brand identity would be very strange to not align with that. So yeah, I do believe that, like, everything, even including your core values and your culture as a company, should tie back to the way that your brand is in market. I think having that makes it really strong, makes people want to work for you. You also, can you imagine if you had a really, fun, cool, creative looking brand outward to the world, and then you came into a company that was stiff and rigid? I mean, your expectations would certainly not match your reality, and I don't think you'd be really hiring the right people. So all of those things really need to kind of sync and be, cohesive.
We have a question from Anna, more around content production. So how do you organize your content into buckets and decide which content to use?
Yeah, I mean, we have a machine. So, we test a lot across both video, across written content. We have an entire SEO and content team, and we're constantly publishing articles that we feel will both, rank for organic, but also will provide value. So, we organize it into buckets based on, different, individual customer profiles, things that we know that we should dominate in market, where we want to align ourselves around productivity. I think it's definitely, you're able to do it with a lean team. Now, my thought is, you kind of have to think in terms of the future, right? Like, SEO is a really hard game to win. So when you're thinking about what you're creating, like, you kind of have to take that next step and think about why it will resonate, because just doing it doesn't really move the needle anymore. So it's less about, like, okay, let's just create a bunch of content, and it's more like, let's be very, very strategic about, like, what we do and why we do it. And a lot of the things, I mean, there's a ton of overlap. Like, if we see a content series that we're doing for our blog work really well, we'll try different formats with that, right? We'll try to turn that into videos, and we'll try to turn that into snippets that we can share across social. So everything kind of has this, like, hey, can it outlive what its current form is? And can we extrapolate that and use it in other cases? And I think that kind of goes back to having a lean team. When you see things are working, can they work for other platforms? Can they work for other mediums?
We have 6 more minutes before we're live with Anthony. So it seems that your team has a lot of creative ideas. Can you tell us, where do all those insanely creative ideas come from? Can you share with us tips to infuse creativity into a brand? I mean, into your team, because in the end, they are the ones doing everything.
Yeah, I mean, I have an amazing team, like, across the board. They're just I think having the people that are passionate and excited and ambitious and willing to take risks, that's exactly what you want. I think, I mean, for everything or every big project that we take on, we have a brainstorm. We go through like tons of iterations. It's kind of our safe space, you know, like throw out ideas that are terrible. Let's throw out an idea that may not work. Let's throw out an idea based on our budget and then the scope of what we actually can produce. But really allowing people to come up with like their wildest ideas sometimes really works. And I think it's just empowering people to feel that way, where their voice is heard, and making sure that like that's sort of how you run the team. And I always want to make sure that my team feels like they can come to me with an idea. And like, if I say no, it's a conversation. It's not, I'm shutting them down. So I think that it's really important. Our ideas they come in many ways. They come from us enjoying time together, right? Like we could be sitting around, you know, one of our top performing ads right now on OTT was an idea that our head of video had with me, where we were joking around about something. And we joked around that about 2 years ago, and then we decided to create it. And we're like, this really doesn't have any data to support that it'll work, but it's funny and it's working really well. So, you know, you never know. And I think you want to empower that mindset, because once you have that mindset within a team and you've built that culture, that's where the great ideas come. Things start to just like go into effect.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're creating a mindset that kind of allows for those things to come to life.
Great. We have a question from Crystal. It's actually still around, do you need to split your content between lead generation and performance and awareness and branding content? So do you have a call to action when posting these types of contents on social? So for your more awareness content and creative content.
I think there's definitely overlap. Like I always want to make sure that there's some type of overlap. But yes, of course, like demand gen content is a little bit different than the content that we're creating for pure like performance videos. Like everything kind of has its buckets, but you're still able to infuse types of creativity into those buckets that exist. I mean, of course, if you're creating a white paper, like it needs to be informative, right? Like it's not just going to be funny. That isn't going to provide the value that it needs to provide. So I think it's making judgment calls on like what the goals are, what the KPIs are, and making sure that like you're infusing the right elements. But in our white papers, can they be bold? Can they be colorful? Can they be engaging? Absolutely. And I think that's the type of creativity that you infuse into something like that, into case studies, into demand gen content. Versus, our performance videos, in which we're testing a lot and then infusing creativity in different ways. And it's always just, how do you continue to differentiate? It's a challenge. It's like you have to wake up every morning and come up with new ideas, and sometimes you're bogged down and you have to free your mind a little bit to be able to do that. But the TLDR on that is like absolutely everything kind of has its lane, but you can still infuse that throughout everything.
Yeah, creativity is not only for Super Bowl campaigns. It has to be infused in everything you do. And I guess that's one of the most important learnings we have here. We are almost out of time. So there are some other questions, but we'll do an FAQ. Thank you so much, Melissa. It was so insightful. I had a great time, and I think the audience had too. So thank you so much. Have a great day and enjoy your vacation tomorrow.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for having me, and enjoy Anthony's session coming up next.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.